Phil Robertson, thanks so much for joining the Ben Shapiro Show.
Good to be here, Ben.
So, Phil, let me just jump right in and ask you what exactly the new show is going to be about. I mean, obviously, I don't think it's going to be a remake of Duck Dynasty. So, what are you going to do during the show?
Well, I spoke to the Nebraska delegation. I met the governor, and they whispered in my ear, "You have 3 minutes, Phil." So I said, "Look, Nebraska, let's get together, call a summit, and let's just do 2 things that God said don't do. Let's come together, and for 1 year, let's just try it. We don't want to go whole hog wild and take all the 10 commandments, just a couple of them. Let's don't murder each other for a year, and let's not steal from one another for a year. We come back together and see if we're better off." I said, "What about it, Nebraska? Would we be better off?" And their reply was, "Absolutely." Well, someone took a shot of that with a video camera with a cell phone, which I don't own, by the way, and they put it on the internet. 10 million clicked on to hear me say that. So my oldest son said, "Dad, you need to talk more."
Well, I think that, obviously this will draw big numbers because a lot of people love what you have to say. So let me start by asking you about, the difference between doing a show outside of Hollywood and doing a show inside of Hollywood. So I know that you guys had some pretty rough experiences working with the folks in Hollywood who were interested in cutting Jesus out of your show, interested in cutting your biblical worldview out of the show. What's the difference between being able to sort of work in the conservative media as opposed to working with the folks out in Hollywood?
I told the guys, Zach and Al, my son, I said, if we do this, I said, let's have it to where there's no filters between myself and the public that I'm speaking to. None of these people who say, okay, we'll only sponsor you if you'll say this, say that. That's how they are manipulating the system. We'll sponsor you as long as you say something that agrees with our ideology. You stray 1 centimeter off of that and you're out. So when the guy asked me, was homosexual behavior a sin? I'm like, I just quoted a Bible verse, 1 Corinthians 6, 9, and 10. Sponsors bailed out and it cost us about 10 million, but we had plenty left, so it didn't bother me.
and that is the way that it tends to go out here in Hollywood. I can speak to that, having worked in Hollywood and my parents both working in Hollywood and all the rest of it. But that's the swamp on one side of the country. The swamp on the other side of the country is obviously over there in D.C. Before we started the interview, you were lamenting what you were calling the sewer up in Washington, D.C. When you look at the utter chaos there, the inability to get anything done, what do you think is the driving force behind this? Do you think it's really just people who are selfish and greedy and don't want to get anything done? Is it structural? Well, what do you think is the biggest problem in D.C. itself, and how would you go about draining that swamp?
Biblically speaking, throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, throughout the Bible, it condemns idolatry, putting something up that's more important, or more allegiance, more honor, more worship, directed towards something other than God. Do not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything in heaven or on earth. I am the Lord. Once you elevate government to where it supersedes God, and you begin to think the government will feed us, the government will house us, the government will educate us, the government will provide our health care. Once you do that, you begin on a downward spiral, and you end up where all the nations before us have ended up. Not wise.
We are watching in the United States, a really big push toward an atheistic left that's been happening over the last several decades. The levels of religious observance have been going down. The levels of church observance have been going down. What do you think the religious communities need to do in order to revivify religious belief? Because you look at the pews and they're empty, and then it seems like every church or synagogue, they're looking, instead of talking about the Bible, it looks like they're more interested in sponsoring church bingo night with pizza and a guitar player. So what exactly do the churches need to do in order to actually fight back against the encroachment of the secular left?
What they did was, it's been a slow 60 years. In the last 60 years, they have pushed God into these structures that have the steeple on them. They push him in there and they say, keep him right there. We don't want him in the 10 Commandments. Not what he said. We want those out of the courthouses. We don't want a 5th grade girl thanking her God for the sandwich she's fixing to eat in a schoolhouse. We don't want prayers among the football players on the football field. So we've removed God and we've pushed him out of our culture in every way possible. So we've pushed God out of the public domain and we've got him pushed out of the way. So what we need to do is understand that worship is not about going to church, worshiping and leaving. Worshiping God is offering yourself, your body, as a living sacrifice. Everywhere you are, you point people to the God of creation. Everywhere you are, work, play, 24/7. We have to implement that, or we're going to have more of the same.
So what can we do about the culture of celebrity? Because you were talking about various idols in the country, and obviously you and your family become big celebrities through Hollywood and through your other businesses. We have a president of the United States who's a big celebrity. Celebrity has a ton of currency in our culture. Is there a way to use celebrity for good as opposed to celebrity sort of taking over for God, as it seems to have in so much of our culture?
You got to remember, the problem is, you got 1 John 5:19, John the Apostle, a Jew, by the way. He said, we know we are the children of God, and the whole world is under the control of the evil one. So if you look at it, you say, whew, that's a lot of humanity. So it's spiritual warfare within all of these various factions and ideologies. You got Romans 1:28. Therefore, when they decided to not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. And the list that follows, they become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, depravity. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They're gossips, slanderers, God haters. It sounds like the internet. Insolent, arrogant, boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. You're like, they're senseless, faithless, no God, heartless, ruthless. Those are the ones that are running around and will tear the university down if they see a guy like old Ben Shapiro going to give them a few words of wisdom. They say, we'll burn it down and tear it down before we allow him to speak. You're like, the evil one is behind all of it. The evil one. The shooter in Las Vegas, what was his motive? Why would he have done that? The evil one was a murderer from the beginning, going all the way back to Cain and Abel, the first murder. You say Cain killed his brother just because he was jealous. The shooter, those people had never done anything to him. He didn't even know them. Well, why would he do it? It's because the evil one was the motive. He was the motive and the motivation. So we just start shooting.
Well, Phil Robertson. Yeah, well, Phil Robertson, he does have a brand new show coming out on CRTV. It's going to be a CRTV exclusive. It begins this Monday, crtv.com/ducks. Again, crtv.com/ducks. Papa Phil, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate seeing you. Good to see you.
See you, Ben. I love you.
Appreciate it. Back at you. Be well.